You know that a matchup is going to carry some excitement and fun when the coaches are going after each other. Mike Gundy passive aggressively commenting on how Oregon spends a lot of money, implying that they should be playing tougher competition or that it's unfair that Oregon's spending more than Oklahoma State, and Dan Lanning firing back and accusing Gundy and Oklahoma State of basically not doing their jobs by not spending money, because in order to win, you have to spend. That is what makes this game, Oklahoma State traveling to Oregon, very interesting. It's going to be a 3:30 p.m. kickoff Eastern Time, 12:30 p.m. Pacific Time kickoff, and 1:30 p.m. Central Time for Oklahoma State and Oregon fans. 75 degrees Fahrenheit, 8-mile-per-hour winds will be the weather at about kickoff, and Oregon's favored by 28 and a half points. Wow. Well, there's an explanation for that. And the explanation for that is that Hauss Hejny, the starting quarterback for Oklahoma State, was injured against UT Martin, broke his foot. He's going to have surgery on that, or he already did have surgery on that. He'll be out for a few weeks. Almost wouldn't be shocked if he were out for the entire season. That's a massive blow to Oklahoma State, as Hejny looked incredible against UT Martin. Certainly his speed, has a cannon for an arm. He looked like he could have been one of the better quarterbacks in the Big 12, despite, I believe, being a redshirt freshman. Yes, he is a redshirt freshman. So that is a very unfortunate development. That's one of the worst things about college football. And also one of the best is that it is a violent sport, and you get that, the explosiveness, the hitting, the talking trash, the stories, but you also, as a consequence of the violence, you get the injuries, which is the downside. So be praying for Hauss Hejny or supporting him through this tough time. That is very, very unfortunate. I know Oregon can relate to that, as they lost a star in Evan Stewart in the preseason to a season-ending injury. This game is really going to be one-sided. That's why the line is this big. I mean, 28 and a half points is a massive line, even for it being Oregon, a top 5 roster, at home in Autzen, because Oklahoma State's a Power 4 team. To be favored by nearly 30 points against a fellow Power 4 team means that Oregon is a proud top-end program, and means that Oklahoma State certainly has some issues. So how I'm going to attack this preview is I'm going to be looking at things really through the Oklahoma State lens of what they have to do to win, and also talking about why Oregon is favored by this much, and kind of an interesting dynamic. They both played FCS competition, Oklahoma State playing UT Martin, and Oregon playing Montana State. Oregon probably played the better FCS team and won by more points, but we'll use some of last year's points per play data, as both of these teams, yes, use the transfer portal, especially Oklahoma State, but both also have some staff continuity. They return their head coaches. Oklahoma State, I know, returns some players who were on their roster last year on defense and some on offense too, and Oregon returns a ton of players who were on their depth chart last year, just not a ton of veterans from last year's 2024 squad, who, despite losing badly in the Rose Bowl, and I bring that up because that's all people talk about, they won the Big Ten, went 13-0. Oklahoma State, I know, went 3-9 last year, but they were coming off a 10-4 team that was successful. And Mike Gundy has a reputation for being a good coach. I imagine even with the back and forth between these teams, there's a level of respect between Lanning and Gundy. Oklahoma State had a negative 0.106 points per play margin last year. Oregon had a 0.218. That means for every one of Oregon's plays, they outscored their opponents by about a fifth of a point compared to one of their opponents' plays. I always get mixed up in that explanation. Maybe I need to simplify it. But that's the gist. That basically means that Oregon, on a play-per-play basis, consistently outscores their opponents. That means they win by a lot of points. They're a really good team. Oklahoma State was a bad team last year. Consistently, whenever they snapped the ball, they scored fewer points than whenever one time their opponent snapped the ball. Oklahoma State's defense was dreadful, allowing nearly half a point per every play they were on the field. Oregon's wasn't a strength. They allowed close to a third of a point defensively, but they could at least score. Oklahoma State really couldn't. Oregon is 7th in FPI right now with a 19.2 rating. Oklahoma State is a 1 rating, which is 65th. that right there means, factoring in home field advantage, Oregon should be favored by probably 21 and a half points. But you add in that extra touchdown because you're having probably a downgrade at quarterback for Oklahoma State, and Oregon has the ability to roster Oklahoma State. And what I mean by that is they could just blow them off the field talent by talent, and coaching may not even matter here. I think Oklahoma State's only X factor, if I'm being honest here, is probably with the quarterback injury. If Hejny was healthy, or Hejny was healthy, I would probably put quarterback for Oklahoma State. I think he is that good, or could be that good. But Jaleel Johnson and Wendell Gregory, I think, are really good edges, defensive ends. I know Johnson's listed as a D end, and then Gregory's in that rush position, more of an edge linebacker, outside linebacker hybrid. I think that I would not be shocked if Oklahoma State were able to get some pressure on Dante Moore. And maybe if their defensive line were able to have some success against an Oregon O-line that they have 2 tackle transfers, and that offensive line, I think it's good, but they have not faced yet this season, or many of the incoming transfers actually, outside of in practice when they've played Mateo Uiagalelei and Tatum Tuioti, they have not faced defensive ends like this in an actual game yet. So I think there is an opportunity there for Oklahoma State to maybe have some success. But overall, I think Oregon's O-line is an X factor. I think their D-line's an X factor. I think tight end with Kenyon Sadiq is an X factor. I mean, Amari Washington looked awesome against Montana State, getting a ton of interior pressure penetration. We know Uiagalelei and Tuioti are great, and they have size and depth on the D-line everywhere. And then Isaiah World, Pregnon, Harkey, Lalolu, Bedford, or Uli. That's kind of the 6 men who you'll see consistently on the offensive line. I think that's one of the better units in all of college football for the offensive line. So Oregon here is obviously a huge favorite for a reason. And before we resume this kind of later into the video, but regardless, make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, and make sure to hit the notification bell, not just for my playlist for all of my content for my channel, but also for my Oregon football podcast. That way, if you just want to hear my thoughts on Oregon or a game Oregon is playing in, you can receive that notification. But let's move on to some storylines really quickly before getting to my prediction for this matchup. Can Oklahoma State hang around is the big question for their side. They're either going to get blown out, or they're going to lose in a medium close fashion, or they're going to win by a point or 2 or 3. That is the spectrum of outcomes here. There is no universe where Oklahoma State controls this game. They either eke it out with a win, kind of like Michigan over Ohio State style last year, not in terms of the total points scored, but in the game flow, or Oregon blows them out. Those are the 2 extreme poles of outcomes here. So can they hang around and be in that 1% odds if they actually pull this out? And does Oregon start fast again? If they do, then I don't think Oklahoma State can win, even if they play their A+ game. In order for Oklahoma State to make this competitive and for us to learn a negative bucket list of things about Oregon, they would have to start slow. They would just have to. Whether or not Oklahoma State is motivated, more motivated than Oregon, whether they can match Oregon in team size or team speed, whether or not Zane Flores can play at a similar level to Dante Moore, or maybe he doesn't, but somehow Oklahoma State's offensive line just comes alive and they're able to run the ball with Caleb Hicks and Sesi Vealaihai. Probably butchered that name, my apologies. And Mike Gundy. Does how he coached last year show up? Or does the mastermind who won a bunch of close games in 2023 show up? And the guy who I think has done a wonderful job at Oklahoma State and has commanded some wonderful teams. Which version of him shows up? A lot of this game is going to depend more on Oklahoma State than Oregon, if I'm being honest here, because Oregon is just that much better of a team. They are. That's why they're 28.5-point favorites. Oregon could be overrated right now and beat Oklahoma State by 70, depending on what Oklahoma State team shows up. This game won't say nearly as much about Oregon in my mind as it does about Oklahoma State, because the talent difference is just that vast. If Oregon wins this game by 80, that does not mean they're the number one team or are going to win it all. Is it a good sign that they can do that? Yes. Does it mean they are that favorite? No. If Oklahoma State gets blown out, then they probably aren't going to have a ton of success in terms of winning the Big 12 or being one of the better Big 12 teams. That doesn't mean they can't go bowling, but if you are a good Power 4 team, and even though the Big 12 is a bit watered down, you still have to be a good Power 4 team or at least above average to win it, then I don't think Oklahoma State will get destroyed here. They'd lose decisively, they could, but they'd at least show some fight, and that's really what I'm looking for here. I think that Oregon's pass defense, their rush defense, their pass offense, and their rush offense, I think every facet of the game goes decisively in Oregon's way, including coaching, special teams, and talent. I think all of it goes in Oregon's way decisively. So with that, I do think Oregon wins big here. I think that they cover that 28.5-point line. I think that they win. I think it will be an Oregon blowout. That's what I expect here in this matchup, and I think that's what you should expect too. Oregon is angry at how the Rose Bowl ended. That is a clear source of motivation. I feel like I can see it in Lanning, where his beard has grayed. He's aged. That Rose Bowl, I mean, that infuriated that team and that staff. It's why the Oregon players, after that game, were saying insane things like, well, how about we rematch and we see who wins, even though it was clear Ohio State was better. That hurt them. They're in wounded animal mode, even though they're one of the favorites to win it all. That's what that game did to Oregon. And Lanning's also mad that everyone is talking about him and his roster spending money like it is a bad thing, like it's cheating. It's not cheating anymore. You can spend however much you want and no one can stop you. It's why if you have money and you are not using it, I don't know what you're doing in college football right now. Straight up. Oregon has a very winning strategy. Everyone is doubting that winning strategy. And I think that in the same way that Ohio State was motivated by the media loving Texas in week one, and they came out and they won in some areas that in a rematch, I don't know if they win again, or they certainly surprised us and even some of their own fans and coaches with how they performed. I think that you're going to see the same thing with Oregon, except to a far inferior team with a far inferior matchup compared to what Texas had with Ohio State. And also, I think Oregon has been one of the more disrespected big-name teams, even more so than Ohio State, because Ohio State won it all. They blew out Oregon in the Rose Bowl. Oregon's been kind of going under the radar. And I think that with the Gundy comments and also, more importantly, Hejny being injured, you're going to see Oregon come out. They're going to start fast, and it's going to be a very ugly win and probably an uncomfortable conversation surrounding Oklahoma State after the fact. Even if there is an uncomfortable conversation, or even with this blowout, I can't exactly tell you how much this game matters. If that is the result, Oklahoma State could still go on and go bowling, have a somewhat successful season. Probably you won't win the Big 12 with the result I'm conjuring up in my mind. As for Oregon, it's the same as it ever was, at least in the preseason. You can still win it all. You can also be just a fringe playoff team, and Oklahoma State's just that bad. Still too early to tell directionally where these teams are going. I just know that Oregon's much better and is better coached, and they're at home. So that's why I'm picking them to win big. And I think that you'll learn a lot here from some of the backup players for Oregon, too, as I think they'll get a lot of playing time. So that'll be encouraging to Duck fans.